What is that? Starship Block 2 is here, and it'll only have the payload capacity of a New Glenn rocket? The first parts of the new flame diverter have been spotted. We are finally taking a first ever official look into SpaceX's mysterious Lunar Starship mockup. How's that coming along? Will it be ready in time? What is inside? And Blue Origin preps for New Glenn's static fire while dealing with regulators. My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's dive right in. Starship updates. It has only been 3 weeks since Starship's groundbreaking 5th flight test, but looking at what SpaceX has accomplished in that time, you'd think it would be closer to 3 months. After last week's static fire, we saw teams working on every inch of this mound and tower, with teams working around the clock to make sure every part of Stage 0 is ready for Flight 6. On the tower, we saw a lot of work being focused around these protective sheets. These were installed shortly before Flight 5 to protect the internals of the tower from the flames of landing. However, they saw some wear and tear, and SpaceX didn't finish installing all of them before the last flight. SpaceX should now be repairing these if needed and likely adding the rest. It would be reasonable to assume that, especially after the static fire was successfully completed, the majority of the work we're seeing around this pad is no longer repairs but rather upgrades. After all, Starship is still in its testing program, and it's likely that SpaceX will use Pad A as a test bed for later upgrades on its other pads. That's likely what the majority of these works on the launch mount are doing. Even if they plan on redoing the whole design, much of the knowledge learned can still be applied. In this case, it's best to test these upgrades now rather than go back and implement changes later. A good example of this would be on the chopsticks, where SpaceX realized after testing that the structure needed to be reinforced, meaning they needed to not only upgrade Tower A's chopsticks, but also those for Tower B. All that's left for SpaceX's crew and Tower A is minor detail work. Most systems appear ready to tackle Flight 6. Speaking of Tower B, how's that coming along? Work appears to be going smoothly around the pad, with multiple concrete trucks visible and concrete being added to the area. However, interestingly, some of the equipment we thought would be used to build the remaining parts of this tower appears to be getting disassembled. The CC-8800-1 crane has been used here at Starbase for the past few months to build this second launch tower. After it was stacked to its full height, the crane no longer needed the full-length boom. Thanks to some filings with the FAA, we knew this crane would be reduced in height shortly after stacking to perform tasks around Starbase until early next year. However, SpaceX may have changed their plans a bit, as the main base of the crane has begun disassembly. This could possibly be part of the reconfiguration process. However, considering that the smaller configuration was supposed to begin operation in mid-August, something else may have come up. It's possible SpaceX no longer needs this crane, and all remaining operations can be performed by their other cranes. Even worse, it's possible this crane was damaged during Flight 5. SpaceX laid this crane down in an attempt to avoid most of the shock waves at launch. However, given its proximity, it was likely still pretty shaken up. It's possible SpaceX may need to replace certain components for this crane to continue operation. Things like this just go to show why SpaceX is now building its flame trench at this new pad. It will help to reduce and redirect these damaging shockwaves away from critical components. However, for this trench to actually be able to divert the flames from 33 and later 35 Raptor engines of a super heavy booster, it needs an actual diverter. These are typically large metal ramps constructed separately and designed to be easily fixed and refurbished. We can see this clearly at the Starship static fire stand that SpaceX built at Massey's. This stand also utilizes a flame diverter to enable safe ship testing. And it appears we've now spotted the first pieces of the second orbital launch mount's flame deflector. Here you can see what are likely 2 main structural beams for this deflector, with multiple other beams surrounding them. If this is for the flame diverter, that means it is currently in the early stages of production. In this photo you can even see workers actively adding structural reinforcements to these beams. They are likely to form part of the flame diverter's horizontal structural reinforcement, with larger, more curved beams making up the vertical structure. SpaceX will likely produce many of these. They already have enough material to produce around 5 more beams. So that would make 7 in total, and it is possible we'll see more being built in the future. These beams must be strong enough to support their structure under a super heavy booster's immense force and heat. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the infrastructure at Starbase, but what about the actual flight hardware? SpaceX is currently setting the gold standard for fast progress in the entire spaceflight industry. Here's another good example of what that can create. Let's start with what they have accomplished here at the production site. Ship 34, the second of the Block 2 ships, has now received its second to last segment. This is the lower liquid oxygen ring. The only thing this ship is missing now is its aft section with the thrust puck and engine mounts. Yes! It does appear SpaceX has been going just a bit slower with this Block 2 ship than its older sibling Ship 33. However, their pace is still astounding, and this is likely just due to changes being made mid-construction, which slow the process down as SpaceX determines not only the best way to build the ship, but also what works and what doesn't during their test flights. Despite looking very similar to the same section on Block 1 ships, this segment has countless differences. However, to get a better look at that, we need to look at this ship's older sibling, Ship 33, which has been undergoing even more testing at Massey's. But before I tell you about that, we've looked into our channel metrics, and there are over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. We just hit 500,000 subscribers, 500,000 of you. Help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. While you're at it, give us a like and become a wise supporter. Why? Because you'll gain access to a massive amount of extra content. With it, you get access to daily new Starbase photo galleries, including all those we've posted so far. Satellite, aerial and ground photos, more than 400 posts in the past 2 years alone, with up to 7 picture galleries per week. Insights, chats with me, you name it. Thank you so much, you rock. Now back to the Block 2 ships. After a partial cryo test on the 29th as an initial verification test, Ship 33 was ready for the real deal. The next day it was successfully filled to the top with a frost line appearing across most of the vehicle. It did it! This second version of Starship appears to have passed its cryo testing with flying colors. We are long past the days of prototypes popping off their domes during cryo tests. But SpaceX wasn't done with Ship 33 just yet. The next day it was once again filled to the top for a second cryogenic proof test. Seeing as everything appeared to go perfectly the first time, this may have just been a second verification test to ensure all systems were working properly. After all, Block 2 is almost a complete redesign of the majority of the ship, so running multiple tests isn't too surprising. We've talked a lot about how Block 2 ships differ from their Block 1 counterparts, however, sometimes it can be hard to tell just how different they actually are. Of course, the most visible difference, and often the most talked about, is the forward flaps, which have been shrunk and moved more leeward. They are now positioned more toward the side that doesn't get in contact with superheated plasma during a re-entry to make heat shield construction easier. But that only scratches the surface. There are so many more differences. Let's talk details. Let's see what that great new Block 2 design actually means for Starship's future. Follow me. Thanks to this most recent cryo test, we have a pretty good place to start, as this showcases what is likely the largest change between Blocks 1 and 2. Take a guess now in the comments. Pause the video for a second and write down what you think is the biggest change from Block 1 to Block 2. No cheating. Is it thrust? New showers for the astronauts? Maybe a Hello Kitty decal on the nose? Okay, ready? It is propellant tank size. Did you guess right? It's not often talked about, as the overall size of the ship is the same between these versions. However, Block 2 actually has a much larger fuel capacity. Comparing the frost lines during this cryogenic proof test shows just how much larger Ship 33's fuel tanks are. In fact, according to numbers provided by SpaceX, Block 2 ships are supposed to have around 300 tons more propellant. Doesn't sound like much? That's roughly a 25% increase. However, this does come with a downside. The ship has stayed at the same size, which means that SpaceX needed to decrease the payload bay size to increase the tank size. This means that Block 2 ships have a much smaller payload fairing. How much smaller, you may ask? Well, from some rough calculations, it seems to have shrunk by around a third of its internal volume. Now, these numbers are impossible to know for sure, as there are quite a few other factors that are difficult to determine. How close is SpaceX willing to put payloads to its tanks? However, even with all those considerations, a rough estimate for the Block 2 payload fairing volume seems to be around 600 cubic meters. So now what's 600 cubic meters? This is quite a bit smaller than the previous roughly 900 cubic meters of the Block 1 payload fairing. But how big? In fact, this fairing volume is around the same as Blue Origin's New Glenn. Yep, you heard that right. This new payload fairing is quite a bit smaller, which may be fairly disappointing to some. However, there are quite a few important things to remember. Adding larger fuel tanks allows SpaceX to increase the payload mass to orbit, which had begun to shrink. The last officially stated numbers for the Block 1 ships were only 50 tons to low Earth orbit. What do you mean, only? Well, while impressive, it is quite a bit less than the 100 tons SpaceX has been aiming for. In fact, it is around the same mass to orbit as New Glenn as well. So why have all that fairing if you can't even use it? Block 2 is supposed to change that. Here comes the reward in numbers. According to SpaceX, Block 2 is supposed to be capable of placing over 100 tons into low Earth orbit, meaning that SpaceX essentially traded some of its payload volume to increase its payload mass. The likely reasoning for this is that SpaceX wants to keep the general shape of the ship the same, as it's what they've been performing tests with for the last few years. Block 3, however, is supposed to have a stretched version of Starship, meaning the fairing volume should be much greater for that. Considering that Block 3 will be the real weight saver king on the rocket side, that will bring Starship closer to the 200 tons of payload that SpaceX wants to have in the end. They're doing this in steps to have it operational faster. Money makes the Mars go round. Another change for the Block 2 ships is their engine type. There has been much speculation recently about whether Block 2 will be equipped with SpaceX's brand new Raptor 3 engines or whether it will still support Raptor 2s. Well, now we finally have an answer. Thanks to the insights of one of the lead engineers for the Starship program at Starbase, we now know that Block 2s can be equipped with both Raptor 2.5 and Raptor 3s. This means that SpaceX will install Raptor 2.5 on these early Block 2 ships. This is likely just a slightly enhanced version of Raptor 2, which uses the same connection points as Raptor 3. This will ensure that SpaceX can test these Block 2 ships even if Raptor 3 isn't quite ready yet. However, they will soon be equipped with Raptor 3s, and depending on how long it takes SpaceX to get around to flying these Block 2 ships and how quickly SpaceX can produce a flight-ready Raptor 3, we may even see these new Raptors fly on Flight 8 or 9. These changes are huge, however they are still just a few of the many. Let's go down the list quickly to get you up to speed. What else is there to mention? Block 2 starships also have redesigned tank domes, otherwise known as E-domes. They are flatter and produced in fewer pieces to allow for easier and stronger manufacturing due to reduced welds, as well as provide an increase in the usable area around these domes. The heat shield has been completely overhauled. The newer, stronger tiles are now present along with many other changes across the heat shield, which result from lessons learned during these early flight tests. There's also the downcomer, which now sports a funnel and what appears to be 3 additional downcomer pipes for the outer vacuum engine's greater flow rates. There are also now 2 separate raceways to transfer information up and down the ship, possibly for increased redundancy. There have also been countless changes to the ship's manufacturing process to enable rapid production. Block 2 is truly a complete overhaul of the design, with almost no part remaining the same. Despite all of the changes we've listed, there are still hundreds if not thousands of changes throughout the ship that we have left out, as they are just too numerous to mention. This includes everything from changes to the communication antennas to the locations of the reaction control system thrusters. Changes really do go on forever. All of these changes have been to finalize the design of the Starship, taking it from just a testbed vehicle to one that can actually perform work, such as deploying Starlink satellites and even landing on the moon. Remember, money makes the Mars go round. Starlink V2 is a very important part of funding for future Starship development. With the increased propellant size and mass to orbit, Block 2 will likely be the version of Starship that lands on the moon for Artemis. We have recently seen quite a few updates around the Artemis program. Thanks to an interview conducted by Spaceflight Now with the Deputy Program Manager of NASA's Human Landing System, we have a lot of insight into SpaceX's Lunar Starship. The first thing that was revealed is that SpaceX has quite a bit of freedom with the design of the HLS, with NASA only providing 27 requirements that SpaceX's design must meet. For this system, NASA has taken a much more hands-off approach than usual, allowing SpaceX the freedom to do what it does best: innovate. In fact, even the payment structure for this contract was partly determined by SpaceX, as they gave NASA mission milestones that needed to be met for them to be paid. After talking about that, we got some pretty big information about some of SpaceX's milestones which they want to hit. Here's a complete rundown of all the important stuff that's up in the immediate future. One of those is the key milestone of ship-to-ship refueling in Earth orbit. This is very important. During the interview, SpaceX stated that it aims to demonstrate this in March of next year. In other words, it could happen in as little as 4 months from now. What? This should also line up with when they begin attempting ship landings, meaning some of these flights may have multiple firsts. For this to happen, SpaceX would need to begin producing ships capable of in-space refueling soon. It's likely that Ship 35 or maybe 36 will be one of the ships involved in this demonstration. This means we may have already seen the ships set to perform this. If SpaceX is able to successfully demonstrate in-space refueling, Starship will go from revolutionizing the space industry to revolutionizing humanity's future. It will open up the solar system for human exploration, literally. We also got a look into what NASA expects Starship to be able to do. The goal is a bi-weekly cadence for Starship launches. To accomplish this, they would use the launch pads at Boca Chica, later the launch pad at 39A, and possibly a proposed LC-37 as well. Another insight we gained was that the Artemis astronauts meet with SpaceX once a month to discuss how the inside of the HLS Starship should be built to ensure all human factors are accounted for. This is also helped by the full-scale mock-up, which is currently at Boca Chica, which includes the crew cabins, sleeping quarters, as well as a laboratory. Ha 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 ha, mad scientists. Yup, instead of needing to bring back all of these samples for analysis, the astronauts will be able to analyze them right on the surface of the moon by utilizing the capabilities of Starship to bring a laboratory along with them. Woohoo! What about the moon pub? Surprisingly, another SpaceX engineer released more details about what is inside that mock-up around the same time, and it is a bombshell. Take a look inside SpaceX's mysterious HLS Starship mock-up for the first time ever. He stated that this mock-up currently consists of 2 floors. The first, which mainly consists of life support equipment like air, water, food, heat, and so on. The second, which has 5 space station-style crew quarters, a storage area with up to 20 crew quarters per Starship ring, and a 40-foot ceiling. Woohoo! That floor also includes 4 control seats, similar to those on Crew Dragon, meaning much of the expertise from that is likely being used here as well. Millennium Falcon. We will go a bit more into detail on these in a future episode, but for now it's also important to remember that this mock-up was designed a year ago, and things have likely changed quite a bit since then in order to ensure everything works well. SpaceX also needs to complete a lot of work before getting all of this to the moon. Fortunately, they aren't just doing all of this on their own. NASA has been lending its expertise and testing equipment to SpaceX, including work assisting them with thermal insulation to keep the cryogenic fuels cold to prevent boil-off, and with certain cryogenic valves. All of this is helping to push SpaceX towards its goal of a crewed landing in 2026 and an uncrewed demonstration before that. Despite some criticism from outside observers, NASA does appear to believe SpaceX is on track to achieve this goal, with the main roadblock being any unknowns or unforeseen problems that may arise during the many firsts SpaceX is attempting to achieve. Starship hasn't been the only rocket moving quickly recently. Surprisingly, Blue Origin's New Glenn has also been moving fast. For the first time, its first stage, with its engines installed, has been moved to the launch pad ahead of its static fire. Woohoo! Nice! From here, all we need to do is wait for New Glenn to be placed on the launch mount, fueled, and then static fired. This should be happening fairly soon. However, Blue Origin is known for its thoroughness before testing, as it wants to adhere to the strictest safety and regulatory standards. After all, that's why Blue Origin recently complained to NASA about SpaceX's plans to launch Starships from Pad 39A at Cape Canaveral. And they do at least have some ground to stand on federally, as SpaceX was cited for things such as industrial wastewater released from its water deluge system without having filed the proper paperwork. Wait, this paper doesn't say SpaceX. This is actually a recent citation for Blue Origin, following their static fire for New Glenn's upper stage, in which they also used their own water deluge system without the proper permits. What? According to the document, Blue Origin appears to have intentionally used this water deluge system without the proper approval. Maybe Blue Origin should look into limiting the launches of their own vehicles to protect the environment as well? Surely not, as that would hinder maybe the most important human developments in history. In all seriousness, similar to SpaceX's violation, this one seems a bit misplaced, and in this case likely even more so, as New Glenn's upper stage uses hydrogen engines, meaning the byproduct of them burning is pure water. Regulations are important where harm can be done, but is it the right way to hinder launch providers with this kind of stuff? Hopefully by the time New Glenn's first stage is ready for its static fire, they will have the proper permit and approval. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, it is sure to be a spectacular sight, as New Glenn is said to be one of the most powerful rockets ever built, on par with, and in some cases even exceeding, the Falcon Heavy's capabilities. On top, it will also be reusable, similar to the Falcon family of rockets. Best of luck to Blue Origin in this upcoming static fire. Hopefully they can finish all the paperwork before the static fire this time. That's it for today. Remember to smash the like button, subscribe for more. This is what fuels the algorithm. This is how you can help us for free. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A new Raptor design and our epic Flight 5 designs are both up. Link is in the description and in the card you should see now. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next episode. They gave NASA, I can do this, mid-June, August. Trench it, yes. It's for Starship, Starship.